So this landed on my Linux migration guide last week. Kira says she's been on Windows since '95. She's debloated her system, ripped out Copilot, gone local account, post updates, and she's still on fence about switching because I talked about storefront games and said no about emulation. And she's right, I didn't. That's a gap no one talks about. So I'm going to change that. Because what Kira doesn't know yet, and what most people sitting on that same fence don't know, is that Linux isn't just capable of running emulators. For most systems, it runs them better than Windows does. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly why. You're going to know 3 different ways to get started, and I'll show you my own rig doing it. Alright, you lot. Just a quick word on this. Some of the things I'll be saying in this video are for educational purposes only. Everything I'm running on my machine, I own physical or digital copies. I purchase rates to play them. My games, my hardware, my rate to play them however I choose. I don't condone downloading games you haven't paid for. If you own it, crack on. Emulate it however you want. If you don't own it, that's on you, at your own risk, and not to do with me. Right, now that's out of the way, I'll start with why Linux has a structural advantage for emulation. And I mean structural, because it's baked into how these operating systems are built, not some fanboy opinion piece. See, every emulator you run is fighting for resources. It's pretending to be a completely different piece of hardware, translating instructions in real time, and that's brutally demanding on your CPU. PS3 emulation through RPCS3 will hammer every thread you've got. Switch emulation needs clean, uninterrupted access to your GPU's Vulkan pipeline. These aren't lightweight apps, and they need everything your machine can give them. And here's where Windows fucks you before you've even launched a game. Each sat there running telemetry services phoning home to Microsoft, with its Copilot residue chewing RAM even after you've supposedly disabled it. You've got Defender doing background scans at whatever moment it fancies, search indexing crawling your drives, OneDrive syncing, and Update Orchestrator checking in. All of that stealing CPU cycles and memory bandwidth from your emulator. And yeah, I know Kira said she's debloated hers, but even a debloated Windows 11 install is running hundreds of background services you can't fully kill without breaking something else. You're not in control of your rig. Microsoft is. But Linux don't do that. A clean CachyOS or any decent Linux distro boots with a fractionate background overhead. There's no telemetry, no forced services phoning home, no update system that randomly decides to thrash your disk while you're mid-session. Every cycle your CPU's not wasting on Windows bollocks is a cycle your emulator gets to use. And this isn't just theory. Emulator developers have confirmed that RPCS3 consistently performs better on Linux due to more efficient thread scheduling and lower system overhead. Users across emulation communities consistently report higher average frame rates on Linux for PS3 titles. And Switch emulation through folks like Eden has been benchmarked showing significantly higher FPS on Linux-based systems compared to Windows running identical hardware. But it's not universal. Results vary by emulator, by game, by GPU vendor. What is consistent is that Linux gives your emulator more of your hardware to work with, because it's not wasting it on itself, and that advantage gets better as emulators get more demanding. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend Linux wins every single benchmark, because it don't. On extreme low-end hardware with barely any VRAM, like integrated Vega graphics, capped at 1GB, Windows can actually outperform Linux for Switch emulation because its driver memory paging handles VRAM starvation more gracefully. And if you're running an NVIDIA card, heavy GPU-saturated scenes in PCSX2 can show Windows pulling ahead on 1% loads by quite a bit, because NVIDIA's proprietary Windows driver still has tighter scheduling under absolute peak load. That's just how it is, for now. But here's what matters. For the vast majority of people, on mainstream hardware with half-decent GPU, Linux gives you more performance headroom for emulation because it wastes less on itself. That's not an opinion. It's measured, repeatable, and getting wider every year as Windows gets fatter and Linux's Mesa graphics stack gets sharper. Speaking of which, AMD discontinued their Linux Vulkan driver AMD VLK back in September last year, and threw their full weight behind RDV, which is community-driven, open source, and now officially AMD's recommended Vulkan driver on Linux. That means if you're running an AMD card, your emulation Vulkan pipeline is being actively developed by Valve engineers, Red Hat engineers, and AMD themselves, all contributing to one code base. Windows don't have that. Instead, they get whatever AMD corporate driver team decides to ship quarterly. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. That's great, Scotty, but I'm not wiping my drive for this. And you don't have to. Not even close. Because there's a way to try Linux emulation without touching your Windows install. No risk, no installation. It's called Batocera, and it's a full Linux operating system built specifically for emulation that runs entirely off a USB stick. You download image, flash it onto a USB drive, boot your PC from it, and suddenly you're sitting in a console-style front end called Emulation Station with controller support out at box. Your hard drive stays completely untouched. Windows don't know what happened. And when you're done, you reboot, pull USB stick out, and you're back in Windows like naught changed. But Batocera ain't just a toy or a gimmick. It's a full embedded Linux distro that's been in active development for years. And version 43, codenamed Glasswing, just dropped in March 2026 with some nice meaty upgrades. x86 systems with AMD and Intel graphics now default to Wayland using a lightweight compositor called LabWC. They've added SHAD PS4 support since version 42, which means early PlayStation 4 emulation is available on a USB stick now. Think about that for a second. You can boot a USB drive and run PS4 games on it. It's experimental, it's early days, but it's there, and it's improving fast. And here's something that'll blow minds of anyone who's ever tried to play a Japanese game they couldn't read. Batocera has built-in AI game translation. You hit a controller hotkey, it pauses emulation, does OCR on whatever text is on screen, runs it through a translation API, and overlays translated text right on your paused frame. For RetroArch cores, it works out at box. You can route it through different translation services if you want better quality than default. And there's even people running local language models for it. That's not something Windows is offering you from a USB stick, is it? Batocera supports everything from Atari 2600 all the way up to PS3 and Switch. RetroArch handles your retro stuff. Standalone emulators handle your modern systems. It auto-detects controllers. It's got scraping built in so your game library looks beautiful with box art and metadata. And cause it's a dedicated OS with no else running, every resource on your machine goes directly to emulation. No desktop environment eating RAM, no background services, just pure, focused emulation performance. Now, V43 did deprecate something called Custom SH, which were an old way power users used to run custom scripts at boot. It's been replaced by a proper services architecture that's actually better, more structured, with start and stop commands and integration into emulation station settings. But if you're coming in fresh, you won't notice. It's only relevant if you're migrating from an older setup. For NVIDIA users, V43 includes NVIDIA drivers on x86 64v3 image but labels them experimental. If you've got an NVIDIA card on desktop, Batocera team recommends sticking with standard x86 64 image running Xorg for stability. AMD and Intel just work on preferred image with Wayland. Same story we've seen across Linux. AMD makes life easier. And honestly, Batocera's perfect for more than just testing. If you've got an old laptop gathering dust or a mini PC you bought for a media center and never used, flash Batocera onto its drive and you got a permanent retro console. Turns basically any x86 hardware into a dedicated emulation machine. And it's completely free. But what if you want emulation alongside your Steam library, Proton, and your storefront games? All in one OS that you don't need a computer science degree to maintain. That's where Bazzite comes in. Bazzite's a Fedora-based gaming-focused Linux distro. And honestly, calling it gaming-focused is underselling it. It's built on atomic image technology, which means systems essentially immutable. You'd have to go out your way to break it. Updates are automatic and atomic, meaning they either apply completely or not at all. No half-baked update states like Windows loves to gift you at 3 in the morning. And if an update does cause problems, you can roll back to a previous version in seconds. It's basically a gaming console's reliability with a full desktop PC's capability. For emulation specifically, Bazzite has EmuDeck and RetroDeck available right through its built-in app portal called Bazzite Portal. You don't need to mess about in terminal. You click install, it sets everything up, configures your emulators, creates your ROM directories, and you're away. It handles RetroArch for retro systems, standalone emulators for PS2, PS3, Switch, and ties everything together so your emulated games show up alongside your Steam library. That's everything in one interface, exactly as Steam lovers like it. Xbox controllers, PlayStation DualSense, Switch Pro controllers, even steering wheels are all supported out of box. For handheld devices like Steam Deck, ROG Ally and Legion Go, it's got a dedicated handheld edition with Steam Deck style gaming mode interface. You boot straight into controller navigated front end. Your emulated games are right there next to your Steam tile, and it feels like a console. It's a massive deal for emulation because half of frustration on Windows is getting controllers properly mapped per emulator. Bazzite and EmuDeck handle that for you. And because it's Fedora based, you got access to Flatpak through FlatHub, which means every emulator that publishes a Flatpak gets automatic updates through your system's package manager. No manually downloading new versions. No checking GitHub releases pages. It just stays current. Combine that with Proton for your storefront games, and you got a machine that plays your Steam library through Proton, plays your retro and emulated library through EmuDeck and RetroArch, streams cloud games through a browser, and does it all while being almost impossible to break. That's a compelling package for anyone who wants everything under one roof without maintenance overhead at traditional Linux desktop. Now, Bazzite's immutability is its strength, but it's also its limitation if you're a tinkerer. You can't just install random packages from terminal like you would on Arch or Fedora Workstation. Everything goes through Flatpak or containers. For most people, that's actually perfect because it stops you accidentally breaking your system. But if you're the type who wants to compile custom emulator builds from source or mess with kernel parameters for specific hardware optimizations, Bazzite's going to feel restrictive. And that's by design because it's built for people who just want stuff to work, not people who want to fiddle. Now let me show you what actually happens when you run emulators on a proper Linux rig. I'm running on CachyOS with KDE Plasma, Ryzen 7 9800X3D, an RTX 3080 Ti, 32GB of RAM. I'm managing all of this through Lutris, which is free open source game manager for Linux. Think of it as your one-stop hub. It handles emulators, wine games, native Linux titles, all from one interface. You install your emulators through it. It manages your libraries. And it keeps everything organised without you having to hunt through application menus or remember which terminal command launched what. If you've used Heroic Games Launcher for your Epic and GOG stuff, Lutris is that same energy but for literally everything, emulation included. And here's what I've got installed and running right now. DGen for Mega Drive emulation, Sega Genesis for you lot across pond. It's lightweight, fast, and handles everything from Sonic to Streets of Rage without breaking a sweat. On Linux, it's running with basically zero overhead. You could probably run this on a calculator at this point, but it's there. It works, and it's smooth as all. SNES 9X for Super Nintendo, another one that just works. If you grew up with a SNES and you've still got those cartridges in a box somewhere, this is your excuse to play them again at higher resolution with better frame pacing than original hardware ever managed. Mupen 64 Plus for N64. Now this one's interesting because N64 emulation has historically been a bit of a mess on any platform, but Mupen 64 Plus on Linux is properly solid. And through Lutris it's configured and run without me having to faff about with plugin settings like it's 2006. GoldenEye and Star Wars Episode 1 Racer both run beautifully. DOSBox for classic PC games. And this is something Windows emulation guides never talk about because they assume you're only interested in console stuff. But if you grew up on DOS games, Doom, Duke Nukem, Command & Conquer, XCOM, all of that runs through DOSBox on Linux, and honestly, it runs better because Linux scheduler ain't fighting with 100 background services for CPU time. Old school PC gaming is right at home on Linux. Dolphin for GameCube and Wii. This is one of the most polished emulators in existence, and it runs like a dream on Linux. I'll be straight with you though, Dolphin's Wayland support is still a work in progress. It runs through X-Wayland on my setup, which means you might see a couple of visual quirks or wrong cursor icons or a brief compositor stutter when resizing Windows. None of that affects actual gameplay. Once you're in a game and running full screen, it's flawless. Whether you're playing Shadow Hedgehog, NFS Underground 2, Pokemon Colosseum, all of it, buttery smooth. LibRetro through RetroArch is my catch-all for everything else. NES, Master System, Game Boy, PS1, Saturn, you name it. And here's something most people don't know. RetroArch on Linux can bypass your entire display server. It can talk directly to your GPU through DRM and KMS, which means you can achieve input latency that's indistinguishable from original hardware. We're talking sub-16 millisecond response times, and with features like RunAhead, which calculates frames in advance to cancel out a game's own internal input lag, you can actually get lower latency than playing on original hardware. Let that sink in. A Linux PC running RetroArch can respond faster than plugging a cartridge into actual NES. RPCS3 for PS3 is where you really feel Linux's advantage. This emulator is an absolute beast of CPU demand and loves Linux for it. Vulkan performance is measurably better, frame rates are higher, and cause Linux isn't pissing away CPU cycles on background telemetry, you've got more threads available to PS3's notorious complex cell processor emulation. Now, I'll be honest, I did hit a gotcha here. On Wayland, RPCS3 decides to throw its game window on my side monitor instead of my main display. There's no built-in monitor selection, and cause it runs through X-Wayland, KDE Windows rules didn't want to cooperate. Fix was setting up a KDE keyboard shortcut to move windows between screens. Took 2 minutes. And that's kind of real-world rough edge I'd rather tell you about than have you find out on your own and think Linux is broken. It's not broken, just a minor annoyance with a simple fix. And then there's New Frontier. Shad PS4 is bringing early PS4 emulation to Linux. And yeah, I've got it installed and running through Lutris. Titles like Bloodborne and Dark Souls Remastered are playable. It's experimental. It's not going to replace your PS4 today. But trajectory is clear. PS4 emulation is coming. It's coming on Linux first in many cases because developers are targeting Vulkan natively. And it's going to benefit from every resource advantage Linux gives you. I've got this on my machine right now. Keep your eye on this one. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that I did have to use Anti-Micro X for my controller settings. Just a quick 2 minutes to set an Xbox controller to act as a PlayStation controller. Because I'd rather have weight to something real in my hand than a tiny Poundland toy. I'd normally set something like that up per game, but that's the pain we keep switching it. So now I set buttons and sticks to keys on keyboard, then set keybinds per game when I install them. So that's 8 emulators covering Mega Drive, SNES, N64, DOS, GameCube, Wii, PS1, PS3, PS4, and everything RetroArch handles through LibRetro cores, all running through Lutris on one CachyOS machine. Same machine I game on through Steam and Proton, record me games with OBS, and edit videos on DaVinci Resolve. Not a dedicated box or a USB stick, my daily driver, doing everything and running emulation beautifully, and better than Windows would on identical hardware. So, Kira, and everyone else sat on that fence, I hope this settles it. Emulation into reason to stay on Windows. If it's another reason to leave. You can try tonight with a USB stick and Batocera without changing a single thing on your PC. You can go all in with Bazzite and have a console-like emulation machine that also runs your Steam library. Or you can do what I did and run it all on a proper Linux desktop as part of your everyday setup. Whatever your comfort level, there's an entry point, and every single one of them is free. And if you like this video, YouTube says you'll like this and next. So go check that out, and I'll see you there, you magnificent.